A German shepherd fighting for his life in a raging river. An elderly man with nothing left to lose when their paths cross. A story of extraordinary courage unfolds that will leave you breathless. What happens when this brave soul risks everything to save a Dutch everyone else had given up on, and the heartbreaking twist that follows will make you question everything you know about loyalty and sacrifice. Get ready for a journey that will forever change how you see the powerful bond between humans and dogs. Frank Miller stood at the edge of the thundering Blackwater River, his weathered hands gripping the wooden railing of the observation deck. At 76, the retired firefighter had come here every day for the past 3 years, ever since losing his wife, Emma, to Alzheimer's. The river's constant motion somehow soothed his grief, its endless journey, a reminder that life continues, even when it feels impossible. Spring rains had swollen their river to dangerous levels. Warning signs had been posted all along the shore, keeping the usual weekend visitors away. Frank welcomed the solitude, the roar of the water drowning out the emptiness in his heart. That's when he heard it, a desperate howl barely audible above. The river's rage. Frank scanned the churning waters, his eyes still sharp. Despite his age 30 yards upstream, something dark thrashed against the current. "Dear God," Frank whispered, realizing it was a German shepherd fighting desperately to keep its head above water. Without hesitation, Frank moved along the shore, keeping pace with the struggling dog. The animal's eyes, wide with terror, locked with his for a brief moment. In that instant, Frank saw a will to live that mirrored his own buried desire to find purpose again. The river bent sharply ahead, creating a deadly section of rapids. If the dog reached that point, there would be no hope. Frank's mind raced back to his rescue, training, calculating odds and options as the dog was swept closer to certain death. "Holden, boy!" Frank shouted, though he knew the animal couldn't hear him over the roaring water. A fallen tree extended partially into the river just before Therapids. It might be the only chance. Frank's arthritic knees protested as he hurried toward it, his heart pounding with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. As the German shepherd neared the tree, Frank saw a battered collar around its neck. This wasn't a wild animal. Someone had abandoned this dog, left it to face the river's fury alone. "Not on my watch." Frank muttered, memories of countless rescues flooding back as he prepared to do the one thing his doctor had explicitly warned against: putting his failing heart under extreme stress. But in that moment, looking at the dog's fading struggles, Frank knew that some risks were worth taking, even if they came with the highest price. His own life had lost its purpose when Emma died. Perhaps saving this one life could give meaning to what remained of his. He took a deep breath, felt the familiar tightness in his chest, and stepped toward the water's edge. If this was to be his final act, in this world at least, it would be one of courage. The freezing water hit Frank like 1,000 needles as he waited in, gripping the fallen tree for support. The river tugged at his legs with frightening strength, threatening to sweep him away with each step. His chest tightened, a warning sign. He chose, "Twin your come on, old man." He growled to himself, one last rescue. The German shepherd was being carried directly toward him, its powerful legs paddling frantically against the current. Frank could see now it was a maley dog, young but fully grown, with striking markings across his face. Each passing second brought the animal closer to exhaustion. Frank secured his position, bracing his feet against submerged rocks. The dog was only 15 feet away now, but the current was pushing him toward the far side of the tree. If he missed this chance, the rapids awaited. "Here, boy." Frank called, his voice carrying a command authority from years of service. Whether by miracle or instinct, the dog's eyes focused on Frank with what seemed like the last of his strength. The shepherd altered his directions lightly, just enough to bring him within reach. As the dog swept past, Frank lunged forward, plunging deeper into the icy water. His fingers brushed against wet fur, then closed around the collar. The sudden weight nearly pulled him off, balanced the current, now working against both of them. Pain shot through Frank's left shoulder as he struggled to maintain his grip on both the tree and the dog. The shepherd wasn't fighting him, but his waterlogged weight strained against Frank's aging muscles. "I've got you," Frank gasped, slowly pulling the dog closer on the riverbank. A young couple had appeared, attracted by the commotion. "Sir, hold on," the man shouted, scrambling down the embankment. Frank barely heard them. His world had narrowed to this single task: saving this one life. When he couldn't save his wife's with that tremendous effort, He maneuvered the dog toward the shore, fighting against the current that seemed determined to claim. Then both the young man reached the water's edge, extending a branch grab. Frank guided the German Shepherd closer to shore, where the current weakened. The dog found footing on the rocky bottom. His legs trembling with exhaustion together, they struggled the final few yards until the shepherd collapsed on solid ground, his chest heaving. Only then did Frank allow himself to acknowledge the crushing pressure in his chest. The warning signs his body was sending. He slumped down beside the dog, soaked and shivering. "You did it, sir," the woman exclaimed, draping her jacket over Frank's shoulders. Frank placed a gentle hand on the German shepherd's heaving side. The dog turned his head weakly, his amber eyes meeting Frank's. There was something in that gaze, recognition perhaps, or the universal language of survival. "We did it," Frank corrected, unaware that their journey together had only just begun. Frank's small riverside cottage welcomed an unlikely guest that evening. The German shepherd lay wrapped in towels before the fireplace, his powerful frame still trembling occasionally from his ordeal. After the young couple had helped them both to Frank's home, they'd insisted on calling a vet, but Frank had declined. "I know enough," he told them, thanking them for their help. But sensing the dog needed calm more than anything, now alone with the animal, Frank examined him more carefully. No tags on the worn collar, ribs visible beneath his wet coat, and several old scars telling stories. Died of previous hardships. Despite everything, there was a dignity in how the dog held himself, even in exhaustion. "You've been through some battles, haven't you?" Frank murmured, gently drying the dog's ears. The shepherd responded with a soft whine. His eyes never. Leaving Frank's face, there was intelligence there and weariness, but no aggression. Frank moved to his kitchen, aware of the dog tracking his every movement. He warmed some chicken broth and poured it into a shallow bowl, placing it within reach of his rescued companion. "Small sips," he advised, as if the dog could understand. Surprisingly, the shepherd did exactly that. Lapping carefully at the warm liquid, Frank's phone rang. His daughter, Catherine, calling for their weekly check-in. He answered, explaining the day's events. "Dad, you could have died." Her voice cracked with concern. "Your heart condition, would you have left him to drown?" Frank asked quietly. The silence that followed told him she understood. Catherine had her mother's compassion. "I'm coming over tomorrow," she said finally, "and I'm bringing Dr. Lewis to check on both of you." After hanging up, Frank felt the familiar chest pain returning. He took his medication, settling into his armchair with Agrimus. The German shepherd observed him with apparent concern, then slowly, painfully rose to his feet. With deliberate movements, the dog crossed the small space between them and lowered himself beside Frank's chair. "Making sure I'm okay." Frank smiled, resting his hand on the dog's still damp head. That night, Frank dreamed of Emma for the first time in months. Not the Emma from the end, confused and frightened, but his Emma, vibrant, laughing, telling him he was too stubborn for his own good. He woke before dawn to find the shepherd had moved closer, his head now resting against Frank's leg. In the dim light, Frank noticed something he'd missed before: a small, irregular scar on the dog's snout, shaped almost like a jagged lightning bolt. "Thunder," Frank said suddenly. The dog's ears perked up. "That's what I'll call you if you decide to stay. That is." As if an answer, Thunder shifted closer, his weight warm and solid against Frank's leg. Frank's chest tightened again, but this time not from pain. For the first time in 3 years, he had a reason to get up beyond simply watching the river flow. But as morning light filled the cottage, Frank couldn't ignore the worrying rhythm of his heartbeat, irregular and strained from yesterday's exertion. He looked down at Thunder, wondering if he'd saved this life, only to leave it alone again soon. By afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the valley, mirroring the concern on Catherine's face as she entered Frank's cottage. Dr. Lewis, the local physician who'd been treating Frank for years, followed close behind, medical bag in hand. "You look terrible, Dad," Catherine said, embracing him carefully. Thunder observed from the corner, alert but cautious. Around the newcomers, Dr. Lewis noticed the dog immediately. "So this is the reason for your river adventure," he remarked, setting down his bag. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward Thunder. Frank nodded. His surprised Thunder allowed the doctor to approach, remaining still as Dr. Lewis examined him with gentle hands. "He's dehydrated, undernourished, but no serious injuries that I can see," Dr. Lewis concluded. "Remarkable survival instinct." Now let's look at you, Frank. The examination was brief but thorough. Frank knew what was coming. Before the doctor even spoke, "Your heart rhythm is significantly irregular," Dr. Lewis said, gravely. "Blood pressure is too high. The strain from yesterday. Just tell me straight." "Bill," Frank interrupted Dr. Lewis, sighed, "you need to be in the hospital." "Frank, what you did was brave, but it put tremendous stress on your heart. I'm concerned about potential damage." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Dad, listen to him." Outside, thunder rumbled as the storm approached. The German Shepherd rose, moving to Frank's side with a soft whine. "What about thunder?" Frank asked, placing his hand on the dog's head. "I'll take care of him," Catherine promised, "just until you're better." Frank looked down at the dog who had entered his life less than 24 hours ago. Something told him that Thunder had already known too much. Abandonment. "He comes with me," Frank stated firmly. Dr. Lewis shook his head. "Hospitals don't allow." "Then I'm not going," Frank replied, the same stubbornness that had defined his firefighting career evident in his voice. Catherine knelt beside her. "Father's chair, Dad. You saved him. Don't make that mean nothing by refusing to save yourself." The truth of her words hit Frank hard. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain pelting against the windows. Thunder pressed closer to Frank as if offering support. After a long moment, Frank nodded. 2 days, he conceded. "Then I'm coming home to him." Dr. Lewis helped Frank gather a few essentials, while Catherine made calls to arrange his hospital admission. Thunder watched everything with intelligent eyes, following Frank's movements throughout the cottage. As they prepared to leave, Frank knelt painfully before Thunder. "I'm coming back," he promised, looking into those amber eyes. "You wait for me." Catherine arranged blankets in a comfortable bed for Thunder, filling bowls with water and food. "I'll check on him twice a day," she assured her father, as Frank moved toward the door, leaning on Dr. Lewis's arm. Thunder gave a low, mournful howl that seemed to echo the storm outside. Frank paused, looking back at the German Shepherd, who had become so important to him so quickly. 2 days, he repeated, his voice breaking slightly. Just 2 days. Neither man voiced what they both feared, that Frank's heart might not allow him to keep that promise. Thunder paced the cottage all night, pausing occasionally at the door or windows, his ears alert for any sound that might signal Frank's return. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the distant murmur of the river. Catherine had visited in the evening, bringing fresh food and attempting to comfort the anxious dog. "He's stable," she had assured Thunder, as if he could understand her words. "Dad's tough, he'll be back soon." But as the night deepened, Thunder's restlessness grew. He ignored the comfortable bed Catherine had prepared, choosing instead to lie beside Frank's empty chair where the old man's scent lingered at the county hospital 10 miles away. Frank lay awake as well, surrounded by the beeping monitors and antiseptic smells that reminded him too much of Emma's final days. The doctors had confirmed what Dr. Lewis suspected. The exertion of the rescue had strained his already weakened heart. They spoke in hushed tones about monitoring and medication adjustments, but Frank recognized the concern in their eyes. "You have a remarkable daughter," the night nurse commented as she checked his vitals at 2:06 a.m. She called twice. "All ready to check on you?" Frank nodded, thinking not of Catherine but of Thunder waiting alone in the cottage. "There's someone else waiting for me too," he said softly as dawn approached. Thunder's behavior changed. He moved to the cottage door, scratching at it with increasing urgency. When that produced no results, he began to howl, a sound so mournful it woke Catherine in her home 1/2 mile away by the time she arrived. At the cottage, Thunder was gone. The door remained locked, but an open window with a torn screen told the story. "Thunder?" Catherine then called, stepping onto the porch. But the German Shepherd had vanished into the misty morning. She pulled out her phone, hesitating before dialing the hospital. Her father didn't need more stress, but she knew he would want to know at the hospital. Frank was arguing with his doctor when Catherine's call came through. "You can't just discharge yourself," the physician insisted. "Your condition requires." Frank held up a hand as he answered his phone. "Catherine, what's wrong?" His daughter's voice trembled as she explained Thunder's disappearance. Frank closed his eyes, an unexpected pain worse than his physical symptoms washing over him. "He thinks I abandoned him," Frank whispered after ending the call. The young doctor looked confused. "Your dog, I'm sure your daughter will find him." "You don't understand," Frank said, struggling to sit up. "He's been abandoned before, I promised "He might come back, Mr. Miller, you need to. Stay calm your heart, my heart's already breaking," Frank interrupted, reaching for his clothes. "I'm leaving with or without your permission, Miles." Away Thunder followed a scent. Only he could detect his path wasn't random. He moved with purpose along the road that had taken Frank. Away his keen senses guiding him toward the hospital. He avoided the few cars that passed, keeping to the train, driven by an instinct more powerful than hunger or fatigue for Thunder. Frank wasn't just a rescuer, he was Pack now, and Pack never abandoned Pack the hospital. Parking lot bustled with morning activity as staff changed shifts and visitors began to arrive. No one noticed the exhausted German Shepherd that slipped between parked cars nose to the ground, following an invisible trail. Thunder paused at the hospital entrance, held back by the automatic doors and the unfamiliar smells of medicine and disinfectant. He paced anxiously, drawing curious glances from people entering and exiting the building. Inside, Frank was signing discharge papers against medical advice, his hands shaking slightly. As Catherine hovered nearby, "Dad, please reconsider," she pleaded. "Just one more day of observation." Frank shook his head, determined. "Thunder needs me," I made up promise as they moved toward the exit. A commotion erupted near the entrance. A security guard's voice rose above the general murmur. "Someone call Animal Control. There's a stray dog trying to get in." Frank froze, then moved forward with a sudden energy that belied his condition. "Wait, don't call anyone." He pushed through the small crowd that had gathered at the entrance, Catherine close behind. There, held at bay, the security guards outstretched, arms stood, Thunder dirty, exhausted, but intensely focused. The moment Thunder saw Frank, he let out a whine so full of emotion that several bystanders stepped back. Frank dropped to his knees, heeded less of his weakness. "Thunder," he called, voice breaking. "How did you find me, boy?" The German Shepherd broke past the guard and rushed to Frank, pressing against him with such force that Catherine had to steady her father to prevent him from falling backward. Thunder's entire body trembled with joy, his tail whipping back and forth as he covered Frank's face with frantic licks. "So pets aren't allowed in the hospital," the security guard began, but stopped at the sight of tears streaming down Frank's face. As he held the dog close, "He traveled 10 miles to find me," Frank said, looking up at the gathering of staff and visitors. "Tell me Dr. Lewis arriving for his morning rounds." Pushed through the crowd, Frank. "What are you?" He stopped at the sight of the reunion, understanding dawning on his face. "This is your dog, the one from yesterday?" Frank nodded, still holding Thunder close. "He broke out of the cottage and tracked me here, somehow." The young doctor who had tried to prevent Frank's discharge appeared beside Dr. Lewis. "That's impossible. How would a dog know some bonds defy explanation?" Dr. Lewis interrupted, kneeling beside Frank to check his pulse. "But you need to sit down before you collapse." Old friend of staff brought a wheelchair. Whispers spread through the crowd about the dog who had somehow found his way to his owner. No one attempted to separate them as Frank was wheeled to a nearby bench, Thunder refusing to leave his side even for a moment. "I told you I'd come back," Frank whispered into Thunder's ear. "But you couldn't wait, could you? Had to come find me yourself." Catherine wiped tears from her eyes as she watched them, understanding something profound had happened, something that went beyond what medicine or science could explain. Summer faded into autumn, painting the riverside with brilliant colors as Frank sat on his porch, Thunder vigilant at his feet. 3 months had passed since their dramatic reunion at the hospital, months filled with gradual healing for both man and dog. Dr. Lewis visited weekly, monitoring Frank's condition with a combination of professional interest and personal investment. "Your heart's stronger than I expected," he admitted during his latest visit. "Still not great, but better." Frank smiled, his hand resting on Thunder's head. Having a reason to get up every morning helps. Indeed, their daily routine had created a gentle rhythm that seemed to strengthen both of them. Morning walks along the river, gradually increasing in length. As Frank's stamina improved, Thunder's protective presence. When Catherine or other visitors came, evenings by the fire where Frank read aloud from his favorite books while Thunder listened with apparent attention. The German Shepherd had transformed as well, his one skeletal frame now robust and healthy, his coat gleaming in the autumn sunlight. His weary eyes had softened, though he remained alert and protective. Frank, "Dad, there's someone here to see you." Catherine Nepto called from inside the cottage. She appeared at the door with a man in uniform. An Animal Control, according to the insignia on his jacket. Frank felt Thunder tense beside him. "Mr. Miller, "I'm Officer Roberts," the man said, approaching cautiously. "We received a report about a German shepherd matching this dog's description." Frank's hand tightened, slightly in Thunder's fur. "What kind of report?" Officer Roberts studied. "Thunder, with professional interest, he matches a dog that escaped during transport. Last spring, a former police canine named Valor, his handler, died in the line of duty, and he was being relocated when he broke free near the river. The pieces fell into place: Thunder's intelligence, his ability to track Frank to the hospital, the old scars that—" "Spoke of a working dog's life, may I?" the officer asked, approaching slowly. Thunder remained alert but calm as the man checked his neck, finding a small scar where a microchip would be. "It's him, Valor." Frank felt a cold fear grip his heart. "What happens now?" "Protocol says he should return to the department. There's a new handler waiting to work with him." Catherine stepped forward, protectively. "My father saved his life. They saved each other." Officer Roberts looked between them, seeing the undeniable bond that had formed. After a long moment, he pulled out his phone. "Let me make a callus." The officer stepped away. Frank leaned down to Thunder, to Valor, and whispered, "No matter what happens, you taught this old heart to feel again." Thunder pressed closer, as if understanding. When Officer Roberts returned, his expression had softened. "My supervisor says there's precedent for retiring canines to civilian homes in special circumstances." He knelt to look Thunder in the eyes. "And these seem like special circumstances?" Frank's breath caught. "You mean there's paperwork?" "Of course, a home check. You'll officially adopt him as our retired service dog." The officer smiled. "But it seems like Valor has already chosen his home." That evening, as autumn's first stars appeared above the river, Frank sat with Thunder on the porch steps. "Valor." He tried the name experimentally. The dog looked up alert. "Is that who you are, Valor?" Frank asked. The German shepherd considered him for a long moment, then rested his head on Frank's knee with a contented sigh. Frank smiled, stroking the dog's ears. "You'll always be Thunder, Tome, my brave boy, who brought the storm and the courage back into my life." As darkness settled over the river that had brought them together, man and dog remained side by side, two souls who'd saved each other from the current, finding in each other's company a purpose neither had expected but both desperately needed. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and help us spread messages of courage and